Groove, it tends to be an elusive topic, right? One that's a bit ambiguous, vague. What does it mean to make something groove? What does it mean to be in the pocket? And I want to propose to you 3 elements of groove that are very useful to keep in mind, right? And like most theories about complex things, there's not going to be a really clear answer. You must do this, this, and this, and then what you are doing is grooving, because what grooves in a prog metal song might follow different rules than the groove of a jazz song or an Afro-Cuban groove. So these are things to think about and think, how do these apply to the situation that I'm in, as opposed to hard rules to follow, right? And what they are, the first one is the timing, the grid. How well does what I'm doing adhere to the grid precisely? Now, adhering to the grid is usually, when we're drumming, we're trying to play more in time, right? I want my drumming to be precise and in time, but there's a lot of music out there that actually relies for its groove on being slightly out of time, right? If you think about jazz, like all Afro-Cuban, Latin American music, even like hip-hop lately, like half swung, dilla beats, all sorts of stuff like that. So being on the grid is not necessarily the goal. Considering the grid, that is our first element of groove. The second one is the balance of dynamics, right? So appropriate to the genre, the song you're playing, one thing that makes something not groove, not be in the pocket, is when the dynamics are whack, right? When it's a type of groove that always has a quiet hi-hat and you're playing it super loud and sloppy. Or when you need really quiet ghost notes in like a Tower of Power song and you're playing it super loud. The third element of groove is the quality of sound. This is quite literally the tuning of your drum. Are you hitting it in the middle? Is the hi-hat tight when it needs to be tight? Is it loose when it needs to be loose? Is it the right amount of loose? Right? Are you playing the ride on the bow? Are you hitting it with the shoulder of the stick? Are you on the bell? And if you're on the bell, are you hitting it with the tip of your stick, with the shoulder of your stick? All of these considerations go into the tone of your playing, the quality of the actual sounds. So if we walk through these one at a time, we've got on the grid, off the grid, right? On the grid, pretty obvious. If we're, I don't know, playing a drum and bass song, most drum and bass is super on the grid because it's simulating a computer programmed groove that is very quantized. Right? Whereas if we're playing, let's say, a hip-hop groove, like I always think of Questlove when I think of this groove. Or a dilla beat, like that Chris Dave really made this type of drumming famous, right? Right, intentionally out of time. But you can also think about jazz. If you're increasing, like you're getting toward up-tempo swing, the ride always stretches out so that it's not actually on the triplet grid. You're not going, well, you could be, but at that tempo you also could stretch it out and go. At that point, I'm essentially playing straight. I'm essentially no longer on the triplet grid, but we're thinking in triplets, sort of. We're basing our vocabulary around the same triplet vocabulary that we played at a slower tempo. So in this case, our consideration of the grid isn't necessarily beyond the grid. It's what does the music I'm playing need, and how on the grid, off the grid do I need to be to serve that music? And then that reflects back into the practice room. If I can only play on the grid, then I'm never going to sound authentic in, I don't know, what, a samba band or something. Or I'm never going to sound authentic trying to like play a bunch of J Dilla grooves on the kit, right? So back in the practice room, the things that you encounter in real life, reflect back and you go, okay, this is something to work on. Now I've determined my practice for the next, whatever, month or so. So on the grid, are we on or off it? It's a good question to ask. That's going to help determine whether or not what you're doing grooves, whether or not it's in the pocket. 2, the balance of dynamics. This is huge. In another video, I talk about dynamic depth, comparing your accents, your ghost notes, and moving those separately to create different very different types of grooves, feeling grooves with the same technical pattern. In this case, we're taking it even further. We're looking at each of our limbs and each instrument being played and going, is that at the right volume, right? This is your personal mixing board where you're adjusting the volume, right? If I'm doing... Okay, everything's kind of just medium volume. Those ghost notes need to go way down. How about that hi-hat? Way quieter. A lot of students that I see, their groove falters because the kick drum isn't powerful enough. I don't know if this comes through with the mics and how it's mixed and everything, but if I play that same groove, it's supposed to be slapping, it's supposed to be powerful, and the kick drum's not really there. It doesn't have the same effect as... So the balance of dynamics is huge. The third thing we talked about, quality of sound. This one, there's not that much to say about it except pay attention to it and imitate the original form of the music, the authentic form of the music that you're trying to play, right? Like on this snare drum, I can get a lot of different sounds. Right? I can get a nice, square, clean accent in the middle. I can get a rim shot. It's got some ring to it. That's a totally different sound. I can get off to the side. Right? And there might be moments where I need that big rim shot, but maybe my ghost notes actually sound a little nice over the side. Maybe I'm going... And then when I play those tom fills, right in the middle, the volume, the way that I've tuned them. A big one when you're talking about tone is the hi-hat. Is it tight? Are you playing with the shoulder or the tip? Completely different sound. How sloppy is it? A lot of people, they have this sort of like switch mode of thinking about the hi-hat where it's either open or it's closed. But it's every millimeter. Every ounce of pressure on the pedal matters and is a different sound, right? This even in a hi-hat bark, the tone of your hi-hat bark, is it... Or is it... Right, so there's a lot to consider. Groove is a notoriously ambiguous thing to put your finger on. Some people will tell you, you can't teach groove, you have to kind of just feel it out and have it. Maybe there's something to that, but there's definitely things we can think about. There's definitely guideposts that we can follow, and the three that I find most important, and the three that I have seen when I teach my students to be the most helpful in them checking themselves and making sure that they are figuring out how to make what they're doing groove, given the musical context, are the three that we just talked about, right? So your three considerations for groove are the grid, the balance of dynamics, and the tone of what you were doing. And let me just throw in there a last thought with the tone thing. That might mean affecting your drums, right? People throwing a wallet on their snare, bells on the hi-hat. Right now, bells run everything. People are putting gongs, mugs, also, glasses of whiskey. Anything you can put on your snare drum, apparently, might be the thing that gives you the perfect tone for that song in that venue on that house drum set. So there's a lot to consider, but these three things hopefully kind of condense the ambiguous concept of groove into some things to at least start thinking about and to always keep in mind. And again, these things can and should reflect back into the practice room, what of these things is difficult for me? What, given the musical context that I play, do I need in order to make this music groove better? Let me bring that knowledge back to the practice room and work on it as I'm working on whatever else I'm working on. So, that's it. If you're into these creative lessons, these are my teaching ideas, basically my best teaching ideas distilled down. If you're into it, comment, like, subscribe, and there'll be a lot more of it coming. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.